Mind games, indeed. The question is, who's toying with whom? Hedge fund manager Steve Cohen or the prosecutors circling his firm, SAC Capital? If ever there were a time to bring in a neuropsychologist, this is it. Denise Shull is president of the Rethink Group. She's a former trader who coaches traders and executives on risk-taking and decision-making. So, Denise, there's a very interesting, call it dance, right, that the prosecutors are doing with Steve Cohen of SAC Capital. We wanted you to come in and talk to us a bit about this because we want to get inside the mind of a guy like Steve Cohen. And you've got an insight into this. You were just there. You were at SAC Capital not long ago for a job interview, right? Not long ago.
Having said that, I didn't get to meet Steve Cohen, so...
Who did you meet?
I met the director of operations, the director of research, the chief of staff, and a couple of people in HR.
Is that Harry Boyle?
Harry Boyle, yes. Yes. So they were interested in management coaching, executive position. They've had a coach for 17 years. I think that was well known. And so a couple years had gone by, and they were looking to replace that person.
What does a coach do for a group of traders like that?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, there's a number of hedge funds that actually have psychologists, psychoanalysts, performance coaches of all sorts of varieties. It's sort of underground and not all that well known. I think maybe SAC's was ultimately that well known because Eric Kiev wrote a number of books while he was there. But the short version is help people make better decisions under stress and uncertainty. Our angle on it is the latest neuroscience of how to do that, as opposed to maybe the traditional psychology, which is, goal setting, positive thinking, all that kind of thing. Neuroscience has a lot to say about how our brains perceive risk, and there's a lot of advantage to be taken there.
How about the master of the universe mindset? Beyond helping train traders and portfolio managers to make good risk decisions, if you are someone like Steve Cohen, if you have $14 billion of assets under management, $8 billion of it is yours, your name is on the door, and you are surrounded by people who are there to support you, what's to say that this person couldn't fall into a trap that they think that they're invincible, they think that they're beyond the law, they think that they're just above it all?
Well, the master of the universe, I think, is actually really an issue vis-a-vis the neuroscience. Aside from the cultural master of the universe, but like the neuroscience says, for example, decision fatigue. Our brains get tired. Traders and portfolio managers should take breaks, but yet the pressure is to sort of stay there and stare at the screen every second. It doesn't actually make sense from a brain point of view. There's simple things like using, I know this is sort of not exactly where you were going, but using red, it causes your brain to react unconsciously more quickly, so it's like silly. What about taking more risk?
But hold on, when you're someone that rich and powerful, take Steve Cohen out of the equation. Look at rock stars, look at actors that are surrounded by people on their payroll whose success are dependent on that person. That's not that dissimilar to Steve. Can you find yourself in a situation where you're not making the best decisions because you have no checks and balances?
Well, I think anybody can find themselves in that situation, certainly the more successful. And when you're insulated, obviously it's hard to look at something new. It was one of the things that I found interesting about being in SAC was my perception was they weren't as interested in the cutting edge of neuroscience of performance as their already preconceived idea of how we should go about helping our traders perform better.
What about the other kind of pressure, the pressure to deliver returns? SAC Capital has a great track record, but it's a different world today than it was back in 1987. This is the world of algos, this is the world of HFT, it's the world of dark pools and dark liquidity. Can Steve Cohen, in your mind, knowing what you know about the kind of trading he does, do today what he was so successful at doing back then?
Tape reading is still real, and it still happens, and people still use it. You might have more sources of information, and the tape looks and feels different.
What do you mean tape reading exactly?
Tape reading essentially is reading what the prices are going to do, or predicting what the prices are going to do from how they're acting now. So it's like a surfer and ocean waves. You're watching the waves and you're predicting where the wave's going to go. There's still a speed and rhythm to price action on any time frame, 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 years, that tells you something. How does Apple get to when it acts? How does Apple act when it gets to its recent high? or its recent low? Does it back off? You can infer meaning from that about how it's going to trade in the future. That's a real art, a real skill, and it's still used by many traders. And my own personal opinion is Cohen always used it. I'm sure he's still using it.
But is that to say if Steve Cohen can still read the tape and SAC Capital can still deliver returns that way, that there's less of a chance that they engaged in what prosecutors believe they may have engaged in and have accused at least one portfolio manager of doing, which is to say insider trading?
My personal opinion is that the SEC probably can't understand tape reading. So what he's always done is a huge mystery, like it's black magic. How can someone sit and watch the prices move and make any sense of that? I mean, I have some skill in doing it. I've traded with many traders who have some skill in doing that. He happens to be the best. Would that make sense to a regulator? No, I think it's black magic. So I think that's part of the conflict.
Fascinating. Denise, thanks very much. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Denise Shull, she is president of the ReThink Group. She is a neuropsychologist who advises traders on decision making.